Welcome to Royal Coin Value. Today, we are about to take you on a fascinating journey through three unforgettable years in modern history: 1972, 1974D, and 1975. Each of these years witnessed events that shook governments, changed the way the world works, and left an imprint that still influences our lives today. We will begin with 1972, a year of incredible breakthroughs and heartbreaking tragedies. Then we will move to 1974D, the year tied to Australia's most shocking political crisis. Finally, we will explore 1975, a year of war endings, constitutional showdowns, and unprecedented political moves. So, sit back, relax, and let's travel back in time. 1972. The year 1972 began with a sense of both tension and hope. The Cold War was still shaping the global order, yet something historic was about to happen. In February, the world watched in awe as U.S. President Richard Nixon stepped off a plane in Beijing, becoming the first American president to set foot in the People's Republic of China. This visit, carefully planned and diplomatically delicate, thawed decades of icy relations and opened the door for trade, cultural exchange, and strategic dialogue. For the U.S., it was a masterstroke of diplomacy. For China, it was a new chapter on the world stage. Back home in America, another story was quietly beginning, one that would soon explode into the biggest political scandal in U.S. history. In June, 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. At first, it seemed like a small, strange incident, but as investigative reporters dug deeper, the trail began to point towards the highest levels of government. This scandal, later known simply as Watergate, would shake the very foundations of American politics. Across the ocean, the Summer Olympics were being held in Munich, West Germany. Athletes from around the world gathered to celebrate sportsmanship and unity. But that spirit was shattered when a Palestinian terrorist group took Israeli athletes hostage in their quarters. The standoff ended in tragedy, with 11 Israeli team members killed. It was a moment when the joy of the Games turned into global grief. In the realm of science and space, 1972 was nothing short of groundbreaking. NASA's Pioneer 10 spacecraft was launched, boldly venturing into the asteroid belt and towards Jupiter, humanity's first messenger to the outer planets. Meanwhile, Apollo 16 landed on the Moon, with astronauts John Young and Charles Duke driving their lunar rover across the dusty surface, setting new records and conducting experiments that expanded our understanding of space. Technology was advancing at lightning speed. The world saw the release of the Magnavox Odyssey, the first home video game console, changing entertainment forever. The HP 35 scientific calculator appeared, revolutionizing mathematics and engineering work. And quietly, something happened that would eventually redefine communication. The very first email was sent. Nature, too, had its say in 1972. In August, a series of massive solar storms hit Earth, disrupting satellite communications, damaging electrical systems, and even triggering the accidental detonation of sea mines in the waters near North Vietnam. It was a stark reminder that the sun, 93 million miles away, could still shake life here on Earth. 1972 ended as it began, with the world changing faster than anyone could keep up, a mix of optimism and unease hanging in the air. 1974D. Now we move to 1974D, the D here standing for dismissal, a political crisis that would become the most controversial event in Australian history. Though the dismissal itself happened in 1975, the seeds were planted in the early 1970s. Australia in 1974 was under the leadership of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, a reformist who had come to power in 1972 promising big changes. His government introduced free university education, universal health care, and a host of progressive policies. But Whitlam's reforms clashed with a hostile Senate, dominated by the opposition. In 1974, the Senate began blocking key financial legislation, creating a political deadlock that threatened the government's ability to function. To break the impasse, Whitlam called a double dissolution election, a rare constitutional step that dissolved both houses of parliament. While he was returned to office, the political tension did not disappear. The opposition was determined to bring his government down, and the stage was set for an unprecedented showdown. Behind the scenes, Governor-General Sir John Kerr, the Queen's representative in Australia, began to consider a drastic option, one rarely even discussed in modern democracies. The events of 1974 were the prelude to the dramatic moment in 1975 when Kerr would dismiss Whitlam from office without warning, appointing opposition leader Malcolm Fraser as caretaker prime minister. This move would divide the nation for decades and still sparks heated debate about the limits of political power in a constitutional monarchy. 1975. By the time 1975 arrived, the world was already in flux. The Vietnam War, which had dragged on for years, was entering its final, chaotic stages. On April 30th, Saigon fell to North Vietnamese forces, marking the official end of the conflict. Images of desperate evacuations from the U.S. Embassy rooftop became symbols of a war that had cost millions of lives and divided nations. In Southeast Asia, another conflict erupted when the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia seized the American merchant ship SS Mayaguez. The U.S. military mounted a rescue operation, but it came at a heavy cost. 41 American servicemen were killed. Half a world away, India was experiencing one of the most controversial political periods in its history. On June 25, 1975, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared a state of emergency, citing threats to national security and internal stability. For the next 21 months, democracy in India was effectively suspended. Civil liberties were curtailed, opposition leaders jailed, press freedom crushed, and a controversial mass sterilization campaign launched. The emergency would end in 1977, but it left deep scars on India's political and social fabric. And in Australia, the political drama hinted at in 1974 reached its climax. On November 11, 1975, Governor-General Kerr summoned Prime Minister Whitlam to his residence. Without prior warning, he dismissed him from office and installed Malcolm Fraser as caretaker PM. This unprecedented act shocked the nation, leading to massive protests and a fierce debate over whether Kerr had acted within his powers or undermined democracy. For some Australians, it was a constitutional safeguard in action. For others, it was a betrayal of the people's will. 1975 was a year of endings and upheavals. The end of a war, the loss of democratic freedoms in the world's largest democracy, and the collapse of a government in one of the most stable nations on Earth. And so, our journey through 1972, 1974D, and 1975 comes to an end. 3 years separated by time, but connected by the common thread of change, some born from progress, others from crisis. We saw diplomacy opening new doors, technology pushing human potential, and politics showing both its promise and its peril. These were years that shaped the course of nations and altered the paths of millions of lives.